If you're new here, hit that like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories where humanity proves, again and again, that compassion can tame even the monsters the galaxy fears most. Now let's begin. The chamber of the Galactic Council was vast enough to hold a moon. 1,000 delegates shimmered under the light of suspended suns, each representing a species that had once believed itself invincible. But now silence ruled them all. Holograms flickered above the dais, grainy footage captured by a passing freighter. A campfire burned on the dark surface of an uncharted world. And beside it, impossibly, sat a human man, scratching the chin of something that should not exist. The creature was the reason whole worlds whispered prayers before sleeping. The apex predator, the destroyer of the Volthian armada, the devourer of cities. Its silhouette alone had once brought fleets to retreat. Yet in the footage, the beast's head rested in the lap of a human, purring like a contented animal. The man spoke softly, the firelight catching his face. Then the image cut to black. No one breathed. The air felt alive with disbelief. "This cannot be real," hissed Delegate Sure of the Krell Dominion, her scales glinting gold. "That thing slaughtered billions. It has no master." Across from her, Admiral Vieronentau rose, wings folded against his metallic armor. The footage was verified. Cross-spectrum scans confirm both life signatures, human and predator. The coordinates correspond to Erevos 9. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Erevos 9 was a wasteland, a planet stripped bare after the War of Purity, a place even machines refused to linger. From the elevated throne at the center, High Chancellor Mayroth leaned forward. His voice was like thunder through the dome. "If this is true, then the Council's greatest failure lives. And a human, an unregistered colonist, has bonded with it. We must correct both errors." The words fell like a verdict. Vieronentau kept his posture rigid, though unease threaded through him. He had fought in the cleansing wars, had seen what the Apex could do. It moved like darkness itself, tearing ships apart with hands and mind alike. He had lost an entire company in one engagement and had never forgotten the sound, the silence that followed its scream. Now the Council wanted him to find it again. "Commander Vieronentau," the Chancellor continued, "you will lead the intervention. Bring your elite unit. Subdue the predator, retrieve the human. If containment fails, we erase them both," Vieronentau finished quietly. Dr. Eller, the Council's chief xenobiologist, stood nearby, his 4 eyes reflecting the holographic flame. "With respect, Chancellor, this discovery could mean understanding the Apex genome. If it can be reasoned with." Maratha's tone sharpened. "You will have your samples, Doctor. But if it resists, destroy it." Vieronentau bowed his head, concealing the flicker of doubt that sparked beneath his armor. The Chancellor's orders were absolute, but something in the image, the way the human touched the creature, had unsettled him. The Apex had been bred for dominance, for war. It did not tolerate contact. It did not rest. Yet in that single frozen frame, it looked almost at peace. As the assembly dissolved into chaos, whispers filled the air, speculation, fear, ancient prejudice. The Apex had been the Council's sin, a weapon turned on its makers. Entire archives had been purged to erase its origin. But erasure didn't change the truth. Monsters remembered. When the chamber finally emptied, Dr. Eller approached the commander. "Permission to speak freely?" "Granted." Eller's tone was low. "If that creature has bonded, it means it can choose. And if it can choose, it's not a weapon anymore. It's alive." Vieronentau regarded him for a long moment. "You think the human tamed it?" "No," Eller replied. "I think the human reminded it what freedom feels like." The words lingered. Later, aboard the Sentinel's Wrath, Vieronentau stood in the observation bay, watching stars drag into streaks as the ship leapt into fold space. Beneath the hum of engines, the crew moved with precision, soldiers trained to face the impossible. Yet even they spoke in hushed tones when they mentioned Erevos 9. Vieronentau reviewed the footage again, slowing each frame. The human appeared lean, weathered, the kind of survivor only frontier worlds produced. His eyes, blue steady, didn't hold fear. That alone marked him as dangerous. Most species fled from the Apex at a glance. This man reached out his hand. The commander couldn't decide whether to call it courage or madness. "Destination ETA, 6 hours, the navigator announced. He gave a curt nod, closing the feed. "Arm the tranquilizers. Prepare the containment field. We capture, not kill, unless provoked." The crew dispersed to their duties. When he was alone again, Vieronentau allowed himself a single breath of uncertainty. The Council had promised the Apex were gone. that humanity's chaotic compassion would never influence galactic order. Yet here was a contradiction, a human touching the unthinkable not with weapons but with warmth. The ship's AI interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, incoming encrypted transmission from the Council." He turned. "Patch it through." The holographic visage of Chancellor Mayroth reappeared, cold and towering. "You are authorized to use any means necessary. If the human resists, execute him. The last thing we need is sympathy for an atrocity." Virwanental's jaw tightened. "Understood. Do not fail us again, Commander." The image dissolved. The stars beyond the viewport shimmered, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw movement. Something vast gliding between systems, like a shadow that remembered him. He shook it off. Dr. Eller entered quietly, carrying a data slate. "You're troubled." "I've hunted many things," Virwanental said. "Never one that looked back." "Then perhaps this time, Commander, you shouldn't hunt at all." Eller's words cut deeper than intended. Virwanental turned back to the glass, to the endless black ocean of space. Somewhere on Erivos 9, a man and a monster shared a fire, unaware the galaxy's judgment was already en route. In the silence he wondered, not for the first time, if monsters were truly born or if they were made by the hands that feared them. The Sentinel's wrath surged through the void, engines roaring like distant thunder. And far below, on a scarred planet wrapped in storms, a campfire still burned against the dark, its flames steady, defiant, and impossibly human. The rain on Erivos 9 fell sideways, slicing through the canopy like silver needles. Jake Mercer leaned against the rusted hull of a crashed survey pod, one boot propped on a log, staring at the storm as if it owed him an apology. He had long stopped caring about getting wet. On this planet, moisture was the least hostile thing around. The jungle hissed with life, too much of it armed with teeth. 6 years stranded here had stripped away the pieces of civilization that once defined him. Engineer, pilot, husband. None of it mattered when everything wanted to eat you. Survival was a simpler job title. He had learned the language of the wind, the rhythm of predators in the brush, and how to make fire from the bones of old machines. Something massive stirred beyond the tree line. Jake didn't flinch. He just took another bite of roasted meat and muttered, "You're late." From the darkness came a low rumble, a sound somewhere between a growl and a purr. Then the creature emerged, its obsidian hide gleaming wet in the stormlight. The apex predator, once the terror of entire star systems, ducked its horned head to avoid the low branches and padded forward with an eerie grace. Its golden eyes fixed on Jake, and for a moment the world held its breath. Jake tossed it the rest of the meat. "Dinner's on time for once. Try not to eat the cookware again." The beast caught the charred leg midair, crunching bone and steel like candy. Steam curled from its jaws as it exhaled. Jake wiped rain from his face and shook his head. "Shadowfang, you are the worst roommate I've ever had." The creature tilted its head, a gesture Jake had learned to read as amusement, or at least tolerance. He couldn't be sure. Shadowfang was intelligent, maybe too intelligent. Over the years, Jake had come to suspect it understood more than it let on. He'd found it half dead in the wreckage of a poacher ship, chains welded into its flesh, eyes glazed with pain. It had been starving, snarling, half-crazed. He could have walked away. Every survival instinct told him to. Instead, he had cut the chains and offered water. The decision had nearly killed him. The creature had roared, lunged, and then collapsed at his feet. When it woke, it didn't kill him. That was the beginning of everything. Now they existed in a fragile peace built from necessity and trust. Shadowfang hunted what Jake couldn't. Jake repaired its old wounds, cleaned the strange metal embedded beneath its hide, and in return the apex kept the jungle's deadliest inhabitants at bay. Companionship wasn't the right word for it, but it was close enough. Tonight, the storm finally eased, leaving only the soft crackle of the fire and the distant thrum of thunder. Jake leaned back, staring up through the dripping leaves at a sky thick with clouds. Somewhere beyond them were the stars, the same stars that had forgotten about him. He spoke aloud, not because he expected a reply but because silence had become unbearable years ago. "You ever think about leaving this rock?" Shadowfang's tail twitched. Its head rose, scanning the horizon. Jake followed its gaze, frowning. "What is it?" The predator's body stiffened, every muscle coiled like drawn wire. Then the sound came, distant, deep, mechanical. Thunder that wasn't weather. Jake rose slowly. He knew that pitch. No storm engine made that hum. It was propulsion, high-altitude, multi-core. His stomach sank. No. No, that's not possible. Shadowfang's spines flared in warning. Jake dashed to the edge of the clearing, pulling out an old binocular visor salvaged from his crashed pod. The lenses flickered to life. Above the clouds, faint points of light pierced the gloom, formation lights, disciplined and deliberate. Ships. Of course, he muttered. They finally remembered me. For 6 years no one had come. He had assumed the colony he'd worked for had gone bankrupt or been erased from the registries. But those ships didn't belong to any corporation. Their configuration was unmistakable, wedge-shaped, marked by the rotating insignia of the Galactic Council. Jake lowered the visor. Shadowfang, we've got company. The beast rumbled low, a sound that vibrated through the ground. Its gaze turned upward, unblinking, ancient. Jake could feel it, fear not of the ships but of memory. He had seen that look before on the day he freed it. Whatever waited in orbit was not new to Shadowfang. It was the past returning with guns. Jake ran to his shelter, a half-buried pod patched with jungle wood and scavenged metal. Inside, flickering consoles displayed static. He smacked one until the image stabilized. Orbital scans, interference levels rising fast. The Council had deployed observation drones. He cursed under his breath. They'll scan the surface, see your energy signature and call in extermination. I can't talk my way out of that. The creature ducked its head inside, massive shoulders scraping the frame. It gave a low, throaty sound, something between a question and a warning. Yeah, I know, Jake said. They're not here for me. They're here for you. He sat down heavily, wiping sweat and rain from his face. A plan began to form, but it was a desperate one. He could hide, maybe mask their heat signatures under the jungle canopy. But if the Council had come with soldiers, and they always did, there'd be no escaping. He looked up at the Predator, the supposed destroyer of civilizations, now watching him with a patience that seemed almost human. You realize they're going to try to kill you again, right? The creature made no move. Its gaze was steady, unreadable. Jake sighed. Then I guess we make them work for it. He rose and crossed to a cabinet of salvaged tools, plasma coils, cracked power cells, scavenged circuit boards. His hands moved with muscle memory, the same rhythm he'd used back when he fixed reactors for a living. If they're scanning the terrain, I can scramble their readings. Maybe buy us time. Outside, lightning flickered across the horizon, painting the forest in pale fire. The ship hum grew louder, closer now, atmospheric. Shadowfang prowled near the doorway, every motion silent and deliberate. Jake adjusted a frequency dial, rerouted a power line and flipped the switch. The small transmitter buzzed, its blue light pulsing faintly. There. They'll see a storm, not a camp. He slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Not bad for a man the galaxy forgot. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain again. Jake allowed himself to believe it might work, that maybe, somehow, they could stay invisible. Then the jungle went silent. Not quiet, silent. Even the insects stopped. Shadowfang's head snapped toward the treeline, nostrils flaring. Jake didn't ask what it smelled. He already knew. Above them, the sky cracked open as something vast broke through the clouds. A transport ship descending, its lights cutting through the mist. Jake stared up at it, a half-smile ghosting his lips. Well, he whispered, so much for hiding. Shadowfang growled, deep and resonant, a sound that made the trees tremble. Jake reached for his rifle, checked the charge, and glanced at the beast beside him. Let's not make this easy for them. In the distance, engines roared as the first Council dropship touched down, its landing struts sinking into the mud. Soldiers in mirrored armor poured out, their weapons gleaming under the rain. Jake exhaled slowly, feeling the old adrenaline spark to life, the pulse of a man who had survived everything except rescue. The Council had come for the apex predator. They didn't yet know it had already chosen a side. The dropship settled with a hiss of steam, its landing struts crushing the wet soil beneath. Floodlights cut through the rain, slicing the jungle into stark fragments of shadow and light. Commander Vierental stepped down first, the weight of his armor pressing the ground. Behind him, the elite squad fanned out in practiced formation. 12 soldiers, silent and efficient, their weapons humming with restrained power. Maintain sensor silence, Vierental ordered, voice low and metallic through his helm. We are not alone. Dr. Eller descended next, pulling the hood of his protective coat tight. The air here was heavy, rich with ionized decay. Every breath felt like inhaling history, broken, burned, and still bleeding. So this is Erivos 9, he murmured. I can see why no one came back. Vierental scanned the treeline. No chatter. Moved to thermal formation. They advanced, boots sinking in the mud, visors shifting through spectrums of color. The forest pulsed with life signatures, small, fleeting, all afraid. The apex's domain. Yet something else lingered in the readings. Controlled fires, consistent heat sources, and a pulse signature that matched human physiology. Contact ahead, one of the soldiers whispered. One humanoid. Stationary. The commander raised his hand for silence. Through the foliage, a faint glow flickered, firelight. They crept closer until the clearing unfolded before them like a secret torn open. A camp stood in defiance of the storm, simple, improvised, human. The wreck of a pod served as shelter, surrounded by tools fashioned from scrap and bone. A man sat beside the fire, head bowed, one hand resting lazily on the neck of the creature lying beside him. The sight paralyzed the squad. The apex predator, the extinction engine of the old wars, lay half-curled like a sleeping animal. Its breathing was slow, rhythmic. Every instinct in Virwental screamed to fire, to flee, to act. Yet he hesitated. The human's touch was calm, familiar. The beast did not stir. Eller whispered, "Impossible." The commander stepped forward. Mud squelched beneath his boot. The sound was enough. The human's head lifted instantly, blue eyes flashing toward them. He didn't reach for a weapon, he simply frowned. "Let me guess," Jake said, his voice roughened by isolation. "You're not here for the view." Virwental leveled his weapon. "Step away from the creature." Jake's expression didn't change. "You point that thing at him and I promise this ends badly for everyone." The apex stirred, its golden eyes opening, pupils narrowing to razor slits. The forest seemed to inhale. "Hold!" Virwental barked. The squad froze, fingers hovering over triggers. He studied the human, every detail catalogued, the scars, the improvised armor, the strange steadiness. This wasn't madness. It was confidence born of survival. Eller approached slowly, lowering his scanner. "You've been living here with it?" Jake snorted. "Living, yes. With it, depends on the day." He stood, keeping himself between them and the creature. "What does the council want?" "The council wants containment," Virwental said. "That thing is classified as a universal threat." Jake gestured toward the apex. "Looks pretty threatening right now, doesn't it?" The beast raised its head, rumbling low but not advancing. The soldiers' armor systems flared with warning tones. Massive energy spikes detected, too fast to quantify. "Commander," Eller said, voice strained, "its vitals, they're calm. Controlled. It's not posturing. Or it's waiting," one soldier muttered. Jake turned sharply. "He's not waiting for anything. He's protecting what's his. And right now that's me." The words hit like a pulse grenade. Eller's scanner beeped wildly, energy patterns linking human and creature, faint but measurable. Some form of synchronization. Virwental tightened his grip on his rifle. "Step aside, human. That thing cannot exist freely. It's a relic of genocide." Jake's jaw tightened. "Maybe stop calling him a thing." The commander's patience thinned. "You do not understand what you're dealing with." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Jake said. "I found him half dead in a cage built by people like you. If you came all this way to finish the job, you'll have to go through me first." A flicker of movement. One of the younger soldiers, nervous, raised his weapon and fired a stun pulse. The bolt hit the apex in the shoulder. For a moment nothing happened. Then the jungle exploded. Shadowfang surged up with a roar that tore through the rain. Trees bent, soil shattered beneath its claws. The soldiers scattered, sensors screaming in overload. Virwental fired a shock net, but the creature tore through it like cobweb. The air itself seemed to ripple with its fury. Jake shouted, "Stop. Don't shoot." He ran forward, unarmed, straight into the chaos. The apex turned toward him, its muscles trembling with rage, breath hot and heavy. Jake reached its chest, pressed both hands against its hide. "Shadowfang, stand down." The creature froze. Breath by breath, the tremor in its limbs eased. The glow in its eyes dimmed. The soldiers stood in stunned silence as the apex, a beast that had annihilated fleets, bowed its head to a man. Virwental lowered his weapon slowly. Rain pattered against his armor, each drop louder than the collective disbelief around him. Dr. Eller's voice broke the silence. "Commander," its neural pattern stabilized the moment he touched it. Jake exhaled and turned to them. "He's not your monster anymore. He's free. Leave him that way." Virwental approached a few steps, visor glinting in the firelight. "The council will not accept that." "Then the council's wrong," Jake said. The commander studied him. There was no arrogance in the human's tone, only conviction. the kind that didn't need proof. Around them, the jungle began to stir again, as though recognizing that the violence had passed. Eller spoke softly, his analytical calm replaced by wonder. "Commander, permission to run a field test. I can confirm sentience, emotional regulation, perhaps even empathy." Virwanental hesitated. Every part of him wanted to end this, to complete the mission, to erase the nightmare before it grew again. Yet something about the man and the creature together made that impossible. They didn't fit the pattern of fear he'd been taught to obey. "Proceed," he said finally. Eller began scanning, his device humming quietly. Shadowfang watched him but didn't move, eyes tracking every motion with unsettling intelligence. Jake folded his arms. "You're wasting your time. He doesn't need proving." "Science requires confirmation," Eller replied. "Compassion doesn't," Jake said. Before either could continue, a sharp tone cut through the air. The commander's communicator blinked red, an incoming signal. He tapped it, and the holographic projection of Chancellor Mayroth appeared, distorted by interference but unmistakable. "Commander Virwanental, report." He hesitated. "We've made contact. The apex appears restrained." "Then destroy it." Virwanental's eyes flicked toward Jake and the creature beside him. "That may not be necessary. It demonstrates behavioral." "Do you question the council?" Maratha's voice cracked like a whip. "Eliminate the anomaly and the human. Both threaten galactic order." The signal cut off. The rain returned, heavier now. Virwanental stood motionless, orders echoing in his mind. Jake met his gaze. "So what's it going to be, Commander? You follow orders or you do what's right?" The soldiers looked to their leader, waiting. Eller said nothing, but his eyes pleaded. Virwanental's grip on his weapon loosened. He holstered it with a slow, deliberate motion. "We're not executioners." Relief flickered through Jake's expression, brief but genuine. The apex lowered its head again, watching them all. Virwanental looked to the sky, where thunder rolled over the horizon. "The council will not accept this." Jake glanced at Shadowfang, then back at him. "Then they can come explain it themselves." The commander didn't reply. He turned toward the treeline, scanning the clouds. For the first time he realized the mission had shifted. They were no longer hunters. They were witnesses to something the galaxy was never meant to see. Above, through a break in the storm, the faint glint of orbiting ships appeared, reinforcements descending fast. The reprieve had ended. The storm had passed, but the air still hummed with the static of what had almost been a massacre. The soldiers had lowered their weapons, yet none dared relax. The apex predator, Shadowfang, remained motionless beside the fire, eyes half closed, breath steady. Jake crouched near its flank, running a hand across the creature's healed scars as though the simple act could keep the fragile truce intact. Dr. Eller broke the silence first. "Commander, if we are to justify defying the Council's directive, we need proof. Hard data." Virwanental's gaze didn't leave the horizon. "You saw the proof. The creature obeys him." "That's not evidence," Eller pressed. "That's behavior. We need to know why. If the Council's records are lies, we must expose them." Jake looked up from the fire. "You want to see the truth? Then stop treating him like an experiment." Eller met his eyes, unflinching. "If I can extract memory data from the Apex's neural lattice, we might see its past, how it became what it is. That's the only way to convince anyone that it's more than a weapon." Virwanental turned to Jake. "Will it allow that?" Jake glanced at Shadowfang, whose gaze was fixed on the doctor. "Ask him yourself." Eller hesitated, then approached slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. "Shadowfang," he said quietly, "I can connect through a non-invasive neural link. I won't harm you. I just need to understand." For a moment the creature did nothing. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, it lowered its head, pressing its crown into the dirt before Eller. The gesture was clear: consent. Jake watched in wary silence as Eller retrieved a small circlet from his kit, a thin mesh of fiber-optic threads pulsing faintly with blue light. He placed it against the creature's skull, then attached a secondary link to his own temple. "It'll sync memory patterns. I can share what I see with a visual feed." "Share it," Virwanental ordered. Eller activated the link. The world seemed to exhale. For an instant nothing happened. Then the firelight dimmed and the air shimmered. The jungle around them dissolved into shadow. The memory hit them like gravity. They stood inside a massive chamber of glass and steel. Rows of containment pods lined the walls, each holding a shape, some monstrous, some half-formed. Scientists and council insignia moved among them, their voices clinical, detached. In one pod, a younger version of Shadowfang stirred, suspended in a viscous blue fluid. Its eyes were open, alert, already aware. A voice echoed through the memory, calm and cold. Subject KX-01 shows accelerated cognitive development. Recommend deployment in controlled conflict environments. Virwanental's breath caught. He recognized that voice, an old broadcast from the War of Purity. The Council had always claimed the apex species were an alien plague, born of chaos. But here, in perfect clarity, was their creation. The scene shifted. The creature grew, evolved, fought. Armies fell before it and worlds burned under Council orders. Each victory was logged, analyzed, refined. And then one day a new order: decommission all apex assets. They have learned too much. The memory fractured. Fire, screaming chains. The predator fled into the stars, hunted by the very empire that had engineered it. Centuries passed in flashes of pain and flight, until the crash, the metal cage and a human's voice sang softly, "Easy now. You're safe." The vision snapped away. Eller stumbled, tearing off the device, gasping as though surfacing from deep water. Virwanental steadied him, though his own legs felt unsteady. Jake's voice was low. "Now you know." Eller's eyes were wet. They built it. They made monsters to fight their wars, then slaughtered them when they stopped obeying. Virwanental's armor felt suddenly heavier. The Council will erase this. If we report the truth, we become the next anomalies. Then don't report it, Jake said. Tell people. Show them what really happened. The commander studied him. You think rebellion spreads through honesty? I think it spreads through outrage, Jake replied. And right now you've got plenty of that. Above them, thunder rolled again, but this time it wasn't weather. The sound came from orbit, the heavy rumble of descending engines. The soldiers tensed instinctively. Eller looked skyward. They're sending reinforcements. Virwanental cursed under his breath. They must have intercepted our transmission. We've run out of time. Jake rose, checking his gear. Then we move. I've got a shelter system under the ridge, old mining tunnels. They'll give us cover. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Defying the Council meant exile, maybe execution. But what they had seen, what they now knew, made obedience feel like treason. Virwanental nodded once. Lead the way. They moved quickly through the drenched forest, Shadowfang pacing beside Jake with silent precision. The creature's presence kept the wildlife at bay, even the jungle seemed to part before them. When they reached the ridge, Jake pried open a concealed hatch of welded scrap and gestured for them to descend. Inside, the tunnel stretched deep, carved long ago by machines now rusted to fossils. The flicker of portable lights revealed the bones of forgotten industry. They took shelter in a chamber with a single entry point. Virwanental turned to Eller. Transmit the memory recording to secure channels. Multiple redundancies. If we die here, the truth survives. Eller hesitated. Commander, that's treason. It's justice, Virwanental said. Jake sank against the wall, exhaustion creeping through him. They won't let you spread it. They'll burn this planet before they let the story get out. Virwanental faced him. Then we make it too costly to burn. Above them, the rumble grew louder. Dust trickled from the ceiling as something massive entered the atmosphere. The soldiers prepared their weapons, knowing full well the futility. Shadowfang stirred, tail lashing once against the ground. Jake placed a hand on its flank. You don't have to fight. Not again. The creature's gaze met his, ancient, mournful, resolute. It rumbled softly, a sound that almost resembled reassurance. Eller glanced at his scanner. Commander, the Apex's biosignature just spiked. It's charging energy, massive output. Jake's voice hardened. No. Shadowfang, don't. The creature looked to him and for a moment, understanding passed between them. It wasn't rage driving it, it was protection. It remembered cages, commands, the cruelty of its creators. This time it would choose differently. Virwanental stepped forward. Jake, can you control it? Jake's eyes didn't leave the creature. He's not mine to control. The tunnel shuddered. The overhead screens flared with static. Then a transmission broke through, Chancellor Maritha's voice, cold and triumphant. You defied a direct order, Commander. Your ship's signal confirms your betrayal. All assets on Erevos 9 will be purged. May your deaths restore order. The feed cut off. The commander's hand clenched around his weapon. So be it. Outside, the sky ignited with descending fire. Jake rose, a grim calm in his eyes. They want a purge? Let's show them what mercy looks like when it fights back. The apex raised its head, golden eyes burning against the dark. Somewhere beyond the thunder, the council's fleet began to descend, unaware that the monsters they feared were about to make history. The world above was fire. The jungle burned beneath the glare of descending warships, and the air filled with the roar of engines and the ozone scent of charged plasma. In the tunnels below, shadows rippled across steel and stone as Virental soldiers prepared for their final stand. Every man and woman knew there would be no reinforcements, no rescue. The council had written them off as anomalies, and anomalies were erased. Jake stood near the tunnel mouth, rifle in hand, gaze fixed upward where the ceiling trembled with distant detonations. The faint, rhythmic pulse of Shadowfang's breath filled the silence behind him. The apex predator, once the galaxy's most feared weapon, now sat coiled in the darkness, golden eyes watching him with something that looked dangerously close to trust. Dr. Eller worked furiously over his console, the holographic feed flickering from static to clarity. The transmission is nearly complete. The memory data's being uploaded to secure frequencies across 12 sectors. If even one survives. The truth survives, Jake finished. That's the plan. Virental adjusted his armor, the metal scarred and blackened from the earlier battle. It won't matter if they glass the planet before it finishes. Jake's jaw tightened. Then we hold them off long enough. Eller shook his head. You don't understand. The flagship in orbit, if they deploy an orbital lance, there won't be a planet left to hold. A low growl rumbled through the chamber. Shadowfang rose, muscles rippling under its dark hide. Its eyes flicked toward the ceiling, then back to Jake as if sensing the shape of the weapon far above them. The creature moved toward the exit, steps heavy with purpose. Jake stepped in front of it. No. You don't have to go up there. Shadowfang paused, lowering its head until its massive skull hovered inches from his chest. The air around it shimmered faintly, a buildup of energy pulsing through veins that glowed faint gold. Jake placed a hand on its snout, feeling that vibration, that impossible strength restrained by sheer will. You're not a weapon anymore, Jake whispered. You don't have to prove anything. The creature blinked once, slow, deliberate. Then it pushed gently against Jake's chest, moving him aside. Virental stepped forward, voice low. It knows what it's doing. Eller's console beeped sharply. Transmission, 97% complete. Above them, the earth shook as the first plasma bombardment struck the ridge. Chunks of stone crashed from the ceiling. One of the soldiers screamed as a beam of molten debris grazed his shoulder. The tunnel entrance began to glow from the heat outside. Here they come, someone shouted. Virental raised his rifle. Positions. Make them fight for every meter. The squad fanned out, firing toward the breach as enemy troops stormed through the smoke, council enforcers in silver armor, faceless beneath mirrored helmets. The air filled with plasma fire, the scent of scorched air and melted alloy. Jake dropped to a knee beside a barricade, firing controlled bursts. Each shot echoed like punctuation in the chaos. Shadowfang moved then, silent as a shadow, fast as thought. The tunnel flared with light as the apex leapt into the oncoming troops. One swing of its claw sent armored soldiers flying like broken dolls. It roared, and the sound seemed to bend the air itself, a sonic shockwave that shattered visors and eardrums alike. Jake ducked behind cover as debris rained down. He's going to bring the whole mountain down. Eller barely looked up from his console. 99%. Virental shouted over the chaos. When the upload completes, we retreat through the west tunnel. That's an order. Jake turned, catching the commander's gaze. There's no retreat. The minute that upload hits 100, the council target this spot. Virental hesitated, but deep down he knew the human was right. The council would erase this place from existence the instant their systems detected an unauthorized transmission. The console pinged one last time. Upload complete. Eller shouted. It's out there. It's done. For one breathless second, everything seemed to stop. Then the ceiling exploded. A beam of molten plasma punched through the rock, tearing the world apart in a bloom of white fire. The shockwave threw Jake backward. He hit the ground hard, ears ringing, vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw Virental pulling Eller to his feet, shouting orders that were lost in the thunder. Shadowfang stood in the center of the chaos, unburned, defiant. Its body glowed with that same deep gold light, lines of energy pulsing along its limbs and chest. The air itself seemed to twist around it, space warping from sheer power. Jake staggered up, coughing. Shadowfang, stop. You'll kill yourself. The creature turned toward him. For a moment, there was something profoundly human in its gaze: sorrow, gratitude, peace. Then it looked upward. A column of light erupted from its chest, piercing the rock and atmosphere above, striking straight into the descending fleet. The beam tore through metal like paper, ripping holes in ships miles apart. One by one, the Council's warships detonated in silence, each a flower of light against the void. Jake fell to his knees as the ground split beneath him, heat washing over his face. Shadowfang's roar rose above the destruction, furious, mournful, free. When the light finally faded, only silence remained. He opened his eyes to the ruin. The tunnels were gone, reduced to molten stone and fractured glass. The jungle above had been flattened into ash. Virwin and Tal and Eller were nearby, alive but battered, their armor blackened and cracked. Shadowfang was gone. Only a vast crater marked the place where it had stood, its center still glowing faintly gold. Eller stared into it, voice trembling. It converted its entire energy core into a singularity burst. It burned itself to stop them. Jake stood slowly, every muscle aching. No, he said quietly. It chose to stop them. Virwin and Tal limped to his side, the weight of command replaced by something more human: respect. The Council's fleet is gone. But they'll come again. When they do, this story, what we saw, will be their undoing. Jake looked up at the smoke-choked sky. Then we make sure no one forgets what it died for. Eller nodded. The data's in a dozen networks by now. Once the truth spreads, even the Council won't be able to silence it. Virwin and Tal extended his hand to Jake. You saved the galaxy's deadliest predator, and in doing so maybe its soul. Whatever happens next, you're not just a survivor anymore. Jake clasped his hand, eyes still on the horizon where the sun broke through the ash clouds, casting a faint beam of light into the crater. I'm just the man who refused to treat a friend like a monster. Far below, in the molten depths, something stirred, a pulse of faint, rhythmic gold that refused to fade. Eller saw it and smiled faintly. Maybe some stories don't end after all. Jake turned away, shouldering his rifle, his voice a whisper carried by the wind. No, some stories just evolve. The camera of fate would have lingered there, on the smoking horizon, the faint heartbeat of a legend thought lost, and a human walking into the dawn beside those who once called him prey. And somewhere beyond the wreckage of the Council's power, in the dark between stars, new whispers began to spread, about the human who tamed death itself, and the predator who chose him above all others. The galaxy would remember.